Hello, and welcome to an ETEC540, a Text Technologies exclusive. I'm your host, Troy Moore, and today we will be examining the impact of the printing press, specifically the Johannes Gutenberg movable type printing press of 1450, and its impact on language and culture. In order to keep things somewhat organized, we will divide this movie into four brief sections: the press, consistence of language, literary expansion, and the change to education and culture. J. Bolter has put forth a theory called remediation. Simply put, remediation is when a new medium takes place of an old one and changes it to create itself with the cultural realm. Very few inventions or remediations have had the impact of the printing press. Johannes Gutenberg was born in Germany in 1400 to wealthy store owners. His father also worked at the mint where Johannes was exposed to goldsmithing. In 1434, he moved to Strasbourg and was later found producing and polishing mirrors which people believed could capture holy light. This led some to speculate that Gutenberg was in fact a charlatan. By 1444, it is believed Gutenberg had perfected a movable type printing press, for which the idea came to him, ironically enough, in a ray of light. Prior to this printing press, most codexes or books were printed by hand, sometimes requiring years to complete. Another process was woodcuts, which by this time was quite common. Letters would be carved out and ink filled in with a brayer, and then paper would be placed atop that and rubbed with a bone tool. Although woodcuts were more common in illustrations, they could be used for printing. Gutenberg, however, had the idea to split up the text and place in lines for printing. He would cast thousands of single letters using a technique known as punch cutting. Each letter was cast into a punch, and then the letters would be arranged on pieces of wood and locked into place. Then, using an ink mixture made up with egg whites and a wine press, a page would be created. This allowed pages to be duplicated over and over again, eliminating the need for scribes. It is believed at its heyday, over 25 people worked in Gutenberg's press. Johannes Gutenberg didn't lack for customers and appeared to be quite successful. But Johann Fust, who had invested into the shop for 1,600 guilders, sued Gutenberg, who had now acquired a debt at over 20,000 guilders for the press, and won. Gutenberg was flat broke. However, as an interesting note, the print shop, which now was owned by Fust, began printing in names and dates in all of the printed books, one of the first examples of copyright. Gutenberg would spend the remainder of his days at a small press, printing nothing more than official documents. Regardless of who invented the press or how it operated, its impact cannot be ignored. We will now examine a great influence of the press: consistence of language. The printing press gave writing a consistent look and feel. Prior to the invention of the printing press, individual scribes would handwrite the text, leading to inconsistent writing and grammar. Now think about the words on the screen. Does that not illustrate how important good grammar is? The printing press led to consistent spelling, grammar, and punctuation. In addition, that consistent spelling would mean mistakes like this could be avoided. The mechanization of the printing press also meant regular spacing and hyphenation of the print, making reading easier. This consistency of language rules also allowed readers to more easily interpret the author's writing and intentions. The reader reacts to the words on the page in a particular way because the rules govern them. The meaning in the text could no longer be befuddled. This would create a new type of writer. Consistency in writing meant everything to the evolution of language. It meant language could become nationalized. Specific language and spelling could now be attributed to culture rather than error. For example, Hey hoser, let's go get a double-double, eh? Another element influenced by the printing press was literary expansion. This is also known as the growth of literature. Given the fact that until the advent of the printing press, books were written over months by monks, they were very expensive. This created a situation where only the elite were able to afford books, and only a very small percentage of the population knew how to read and write. Think about it this way. If right now were then, less than half of BC would be literate in the whole of Canada. Why know how if you couldn't afford the books? Over time, more print became available to the general public. In addition, the invention of the printing press, better quality of books were created because uniform page sizes were used and better quality of paper existed. By 1500, there were 20 million copies of 35,000 separate publications. In addition, with literary expansion, what is known as the print culture also grew. According to Eisenstein's theory, which claims print brought transformation to all elements of human culture, the printing press encouraged the circulation of the written word on an exponential scale, not only because bookmaking costs were lower when they were spread over thousands or 1,500 copies of one press run, rather than being borne by one copy alone, but also because production time, which could be long indeed when books were copied by hand, was now shortened. Books could now be produced faster and cheaper than ever before, and now had the potential to reach more people than ever before. Quite frankly, it created an entirely new communication medium. Many writers and scholars credit the printing press as a catalyst for the profound societal and cultural transformations that began to occur in the 16th century. The new medium allowed for the dissemination of political and religious views. Kings and churches printed leaflets, single-sheet flyers, to spread their gospel. Until the printing press, the church had controlled the information, but now it needed the printing press for that task. In addition, schools opened as books became more available. Moreover, mistakes in text were now noticed and caused questioning, thus creating the modern critical thinker. However, although slowly changing, religion still controlled education and learning, and it is no mistake that the most famous book printed by Gutenberg is the 42-line Gutenberg Bible. But this control wouldn't last, as many scholars believe the printing press ultimately led to the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution. The next topic up for discussion is the changes the printing press brought to education and to culture. Think about this. Prior to the printing press, who taught? Well, scholars. Well, what did they use? Well, their own work. Books were far too expensive to actually acquire a lot of them, so research was almost non-existent. The book became a tool for learning. It was now readily available for the first time in history. Self-learning, along with critical thought, became the flavor of the day. It was inquiry-based learning at its finest. Education we are trying to recreate 500 years later. Also, to make book printing for universities profitable, print shops began making more copies than ordered, and the leftovers would be made available to the public, thus beginning the spread of knowledge outside of education in the church. People could self-educate. Students became their own teachers. Perhaps no subject changed or benefited more from the growth of the printing press than science. Students, teachers, and scientists could now look at unchanged copy of original text. They could look at diagrams and they could all look at the same one. No interpretations or error. In addition, scholars could read texts and not be forced to travel from area to area to study at other universities. They could experiment and research using libraries, not just travel. People also became more aware of scientific explanation and thought, rather than just religious ideological explanations. The printing press also transformed learning and culture. It transformed the relationship between teacher and student and the way research was undertaken. Text could now be used as an alternative source of information. This didn't lessen the impact of the teacher, it simply changed it from expert to facilitator. Students began to grow and learn, and in some cases surpass the teachers before them. The printing press also changed academic culture. As academics began to understand the world around them, the print shop broke down barriers between the academics and the workers. It became that books allowed everyone, regardless of station in life, an equal opportunity to education. Also, as different languages were printed, it also gave more exposure to education. Finally, the printing press took power from the church and pushed forward the humanistic movement. Few inventions have impacted the world the same way as the printing press. It created an opportunity for language and learning to reach the illiterate masses. It also directly helped in Reformation, Renaissance, and the Industrial Revolution. Thanks to Gutenberg, the world would be forever changed. According to Postman, the attitude towards knowledge and learning was utterly changed. Inquiry and the questioning of received wisdom greatly increased. In many ways, the communal medieval world gave way rapidly to the modern world and its focus on the individual. In both obvious and more subtle but profound ways, the world had changed. Thank you,